Hello, my friends. This is Lloyd Albritton. Thanks for visiting my YouTube podcast channel, Lloyd's Commentaries. And while you're here, don't forget to look down below and share, like, and subscribe. And don't forget to comment if you have an opinion. You know, the title of my dissertation today is going to be the art of about rational thinking and religion versus science and so forth. We'll see where it ends up as we begin with it. Now I'm going to be reading some of it, of course, because my old brain is not altogether capable of remembering to do this anymore without notes. Let me share this little. Let me start out with this little poem that I wrote some years ago, because I'm just hankering to share this with you because it kind of fits in. It's called Rationalization: The Art of Telling Oneself Rational Lies. There are two kinds of lies most of us tell. One we tell to others, the other to ourselves. The first is called a sin. Of this we are aware, but the lies we tell ourselves are seldom laid so bare. For when the liar and the dupe are both one and the same, then lies are not called lies, but are called by another name. You know, when I occasionally refer to my liberal friends, most of my conservative friends respond suspiciously, "Oh, you have liberal friends?" I do indeed have some liberal friends whose views on most social and political issues differ markedly from my own. Most people, both liberals and conservatives, feel strongly, even passionately, about their beliefs and values and harbor at least some degree of desire that they could persuade the other side to believe as they do. I'm going to inject as I go along. I'm reminded as I read this of the Seinfeld series, which I find hilarious. I watch the reruns regularly and have for many years. There's always there are two or three shows where Elaine finds this really good-looking guy and who turns out to be gay. And Jerry says, "Elaine, he plays on the other team. You do realize you're on our team, and then he's on his team, and you're not going to convert him over to our team." Well, Elaine wants to try. She says, "Oh, I believe, I'm Elaine and I can do it." And so Elaine seduces the guy, and just when she thinks she's got him turned around to her team, he goes back to the other team. And then Jerry, of course, comes in and says, "Elaine, you can never convert these guys, to your team. They're on the other team." We're talking about everybody wants to persuade the other side. Now, a lot of people say they don't. I'm not here to persuade you. I used to have ministers from other churches come by my house, knock on the door and want to talk to me, and I'd invite them in and talk to them, and I'd say, "Okay, now I know you're here to convert me, and I'm really, I know a little bit about your religion, and you're not going to convert me because I just believe opposite of that." "Oh, no, we're not here to convert you. We're just here to have a conversation. We're not here to convert you to our side." But in reality, as it turns out, they are. And most of us are that way, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or a liberal or conservative or whatever point of view you have. There's a certain satisfaction in converting the other side, winning the argument. Now, lots of people say, "Oh, I'm not about winning and losing." Oh, I think so. I think most all of us, it's kind of built into us that we get some degree of satisfaction when we can persuade the other side to our side, which is, of course, a difficult, if not impossible, task. Now, let me continue here. One of my liberal friends recently went on a little bit of a rant, and he said this. He said, "I don't understand why everybody," that's what he said, "I don't understand why everybody can't just accept And then he went on to delineate his views on a very controversial social issue. Now, I believe, my friend, I believe what he said, that he truly does not understand why the world doesn't accept his point of view. But my friend went on to say that the reason he believes that others are not able to understand and agree with his point of view, which he considers to be rational, the rational side of things, the logical side of things. The reason is because all these other people are brainwashed. They're all indoctrinated by the churches. By the clergy, the preachers, the pastors, the priests, and, religious people. And of course, that book of fables that he calls, that book of fables, the Bible. People are indoctrinated by these things. Now, along about that time, then another one of my liberal friends jumps into the argument, and he brings up the fact that that's true. That's true. People are indoctrinated. In fact, I'll go so far to say, this is what he said, I'll go far to say, goes so far as to say that most arguments, most disagreements, there's just two sides. It always falls into two sides. One is the side which has been indoctrinated by the traditional institutions, i.e. the churches and the preachers and the pastors and so forth. And then the other side, which is those who are rational thinking, those who follow the science. Just the two sides. So, let me see here. So, it's not hard to understand why with these diametrically opposing views, why it's difficult for people to just get along, much less remain friends and to have close and affectionate friendships. It's virtually impossible. In fact, my friend says it is impossible, that these indoctrinated people are impervious to rational thinking and to scientific truths because they're so indoctrinated. So it would seem that that the only way for people to get along is for everybody to agree. Otherwise, we're just destined to argue and fight about these issues. All right, so this is the question. Is rational thinking correct thinking? Because, let's see, many of my liberal friends contend that their side, are guided in their philosophy of life and their behavior exclusively by science and by rational thinking. They go with what makes sense. They contend that religion, however, for the most part, is a political structure employed to control the minds and the behavior of the masses of weaker-minded people in the world, and to act by faith in things that we don't really see, including God, is a product of irrational thinking and is pure foolishness. Is that true? Is rational thinking really an exclusive domain of liberal thinkers? One of my liberal friends confided in me recently that he prides himself in being a liberal thinker, and as a liberal thinker, a compassionate person who believes in helping the poor. And as far as that goes, who believes in open borders and feeding all those who come across the border into our country. They have a right to do so. But, he went on to add, I'm smart enough at mathematics to see that economically it just doesn't work. Okay? But nevertheless, that's what I believe. I'm a liberal, and that's the way I'm going. Now, did he not just admit that it doesn't make any sense? That we can't feed the world? It just doesn't make good economic sense. And so, rational thinking? I don't think so. Let's go on. When a military commander tells his men, orders his men to take that hill, or to hold that line. His orders may seem irrational and impossible to the brave soldiers who are going to fight and die in that effort. When they look up and see all the bullets flying, they're going to think, rational thinking. I could get hit by one of those bullets and I'd be dead. Yeah, that's rational thinking. An untrained, unindoctrinated civilian would likely think rationally about his chances of surviving that, and he'd say, no way, I'm not doing that. He'd refuse the order. Military fighting men, however, are indoctrinated. They're indoctrinated, brainwashed, if you will, to follow orders. And they do as they're commanded to do. And that's how hills are taken. Lines are held and wars are won, not by rational thinking, but by faith and trust and courage in a power that you believe in higher than you. In this case, it might be the sergeant or a lieutenant. But in the case of Christianity and religion, it's God. That people, they are indeed indoctrinated to follow God with faith and trust, even if it doesn't seem right to you, because there may be things that you don't understand. Here's another story from the Bible. When Moses brought the Israelites out of Egypt, they'd been in bondage in Egypt as slaves for 400 years. When he brought them out, God told him to go and bring them out, and he did so. He went in, and God performed in that book in the Bible numerous miracles, not only just the parting of the Red Sea, but plagues and all kinds of different things, miracles, so that the people could see that he was God and that he would lead them out, that he could lead them out. And so finally, as Moses brought all these people out of Egypt, now there was more than just a few. You go in and crunch the numbers. There was anywhere between 3 and probably 6 million people of the Israelites, a lot more than people generally think. He led them out, and God had promised to lead them to a land flowing with milk and honey, a beautiful land that would be their own. He was going to give it to them. And so when they came out and they came close to the River Jordan, to over where their land was, Moses sent out some spies, a dozen or so, over to check the place out. And so indeed they did. They went over and they brought back big baskets full of fruit and vegetables. Ooh, it was good too, tasty. And they said, yeah, it's a land flowing with milk and honey, all right. Boy, we can graze our cows. It's everything that we need. But there's a little something, Moses, you forgot to tell us. That place is teeming with people. There's heathen people over there. I mean, people that do not believe in our God. They believe in their own gods, mostly that they make with their own hands, which God had told them, I am a jealous God. I don't go with this other God's business. I don't understand why people think they can make a rock or make a tree or carve out something with a tool and suddenly make that their God. God of Israel said, I am God. I'm the only one. And I don't go with that. And that's what made these people heathen tribes. Okay? So these heathen tribes had conjured up all kinds of religious practices, like, for example, sacrificing their own children, their daughters, virgins, putting them in the fire, or sacrificing them by drawing blood. These were an abomination to our God. And so God says, because of that, I'm going to throw these people out and I'm going to give this land to you guys. But you got to go take it. So when they went over there, they came back and said, yes, the land is flowing with milk and honey. It's a beautiful land. But, man, those people, just not only are there lots of them, but they're giants. They're huge. And they got war stuff. They got iron chariots. And there's just no way, Moses, that we can do that. Please take us back to Egypt. I think we was better off when we were slaves. Take us back to Egypt and let us be slaves again, because ain't no way we can take this. Well, there's a story about that. They had to wander around 40 years because of that. But eventually, they did get over there. And God, who promised them, I will vanquish these before you. Yes, they are big, and yes, they do have iron chariots and all of that, but I'm going to be with you. They can't win because I am with you. I promise you, I'm with you. I'm going to vanquish all of your enemies. And that's what happened. Ultimately, Israel went over there. In fact, early when they first got over there, the first city they captured was a city by the name of Jericho, and they didn't even have to draw their swords hardly. God told them to just march around the city every day, and then every day march around the city again, march around it again. Okay, now go over there and beat on your drum. And they did that, and the walls fell down. And all they had to do was waltz in and take it over. Okay, that's what God promised them, and that's what actually happened. And so Israel ultimately prevailed in taking this promised land, not by rational thinking, because if they'd been thinking rationally, they would have went right back to Egypt and back to slavery. That's where they would have ended up. But rather by faith in God, by faith and belief and confidence in God's promises. Like my liberal thinking friends, I too believe in the value of rational thinking and scientific thinking. I believe in science. In fact, irrational thinking is a symptom of mental illness and dysfunctional behavior. That's what you call crazy people. They just don't think rational, and that leads to dysfunctional behavior. I agree with my liberal friends also that churches do indoctrinate their members. Oh yeah, you take those little kids all the way from Sunday school, they're taught about Jesus and God, they're taught about these miracles in the Bible, that they're true, and they are indeed indoctrinated. And the parents indoctrinate them. The parents indoctrinate them to believe that, look, you need to do what mom and daddy says. And why? Why? Well, just because I said so, that's why. Because I'm daddy or because I'm mommy. We do indoctrinate them to believe that. There's no question about it. But here's an interesting phenomenon that happens. No matter how indoctrinated we are. And look, that's not to say that the liberal side of things don't indoctrinate people either. Mostly the colleges and universities indoctrinate intellectual students who come to their care. They indoctrinate them into lots of liberal thinking and practices. So it's not that all the institutions do not indoctrinate the people that come to them. They do. But here's an interesting phenomenon that happens. Most people, almost everybody, as we mature in our thinking, we start thinking rationally about some of the things we've been taught, and we are free to choose one way or the other. Mostly, we choose what works for us. So if you've been taught something by your church or your religion, and you get to some point in your life, it may be 12 years old, it may be 16, it might be 25. But at some point in your life, you believe that the things you've been taught, the things you've been indoctrinated in, just aren't working for you. So you begin to look at alternatives and trying those. And sometimes you try this alternative or that alternative or another alternative, and you come right back to where you start with. Sometimes you don't, but you do have that choice. Now I can tell you, because having been involved in church and religion for a part of my life, I can tell you that the churches, all of the churches, lose a great many of their young people who leave the church. They get to a certain point and they disagree with what they've been taught, and they choose to do otherwise and to go out and do otherwise. So this to argue that this indoctrination is permanently embedded and impervious to rationale or reason or logic of any sort, that just doesn't wash, because the churches lose too many young people to rational thinking. Now, many of them come back, by the way, because they come to realize that rational thinking is not what they thought it was. This argument between science and religion, that science is always proof. The seeing is believing. If there's no proof, then it doesn't wash. Now, the believer, the Christian or the Bible believer, he reads all these stories of the Bible, and which the liberals say he's indoctrinated in. He reads about hundreds of men who say they were prophets, who wrote these books of the Bible. They testified to it, that it's true, that they talked to God, and this is what God told them, and they recorded these things. And, it's kind of, look, there's a lot of them. There's not just one or two, there's a bunch of them. And, to me, that's sort of like, listening to 100 witnesses at a trial get up on the stand and testify that old John over here, we saw him. I saw him bite Sammy's ear off and stab him 17 times. Well, after, 15 or 20 or 100 people testifying to that, the jury tends to believe them. And so the people who actually read the Bible and read these testimonies, taken over at different periods of time and by different people, after a while they say, well, that might be true, of course. Now, as they look around them, as I do and many other Christian believers, as we look around us and we see the trees and the grass and all the miracles that take place around us, the miracle of a human organism, the way the brain works, all of the miracles that are around us, we look at all that and we're in awe of it, and we say, well, somebody must have created this. There must be some divine creator who created all of this. We look at the miracles that take place. We have loved ones who get sick, and the doctor says he's a goner. He's terminal. The situation is hopeless, so just go ahead and make your last arrangements. And then, voila, we pray for him, and miracles happen. He revives and comes back. And so, is that not rational thinking? When Christians look at that and they say, wow, God did that. God healed my mother or my child or whatever. But an unbeliever, he sees all these same things. He reads these stories. He sees these miracles, but to him he says, show me. I don't see no evidence of it. It's just coincidence. Look, it's just one of those things that happens. It's just coincidence that this guy got well when the doctor said he was terminal. And all these miracles you read about in the Bible, about the whale swallowing Jonah and all that, those are just fables that somebody wrote in order to persuade you that he represented God so that you would follow him. Okay? They see God in none of this. So, well, which one is rational? Which line of thought is rational? To see all these things and believe that they were all developed through billions of years of evolutionary development, or maybe a big old explosion in the sky. I always thought it kind of funny. One orator used the example of a ballpoint pen. If you went up to the moon and you're walking around up there in your spacesuit and you spotted this little black thing laying on the ground and you reached down and picked it up and it was a ballpoint pen, and you took it back to the spaceship and looked at it, and sure enough, there it was with the little thing on the top and the little spring in it and everything, and got a little tube in it with some ink, and you could write stuff with it. What would you conclude from that? Well, I'll tell you what I would conclude. I'd say somebody dropped it. Somebody made this in some fountain pen, some pen factory somewhere. Some intelligent designed this thing, drew it up with AutoCAD or something, and then they went out and manufactured it, right? Somebody made it. But a non-believer would say, oh, I don't know. I think they had this big, 10 billion years ago, they had a big explosion up there, and suddenly it began to rain in these ballpoint pens out of the sky. Is that rational? If you find a little tiny thing like a ballpoint pen, isn't it rational to believe that somebody made it, created it? Then why would we not think the same thing about the miraculous creation of man and life as it exists all around us? Nevertheless, we continue to argue about science and religion, rational thinking, irrational thinking. And so I guess I guess my final, what I'm trying to say here is that God is that the things we don't understand in the world, the things that we call miracles, are the things that we don't understand. There is scientific truth behind all of these things. God himself, who created all things, is the scientist. He doesn't create these things out of magic. He doesn't create the world out of nothing. He created it out of matter. Okay? If you or I knew how to do it, we could do it too. We just aren't that smart compared to God. He is all knowledgeable. He's omniscient. Okay? And through this knowledge, he has the power to do these things. And knowledge truly is power. And so, you know, I wish there were a way that we could quit arguing about science and religion. Certainly, people are brainwashed, and they do by not just religion, but by colleges and universities as well. People are indeed indoctrinated and brainwashed, and it's very difficult for them to be unpersuaded when they're on a path of something that's not working. The best way you can see if something is not true is, does it work? Okay? Because if you're practicing something that doesn't work, you're going to become a dysfunctional person. So it's not what you believe, but how you behave. And so we can each decide for ourselves. We can choose for ourselves if it works for you. If you're functional and you're happy, then, well, God bless you. It's true. But you can preach to me all you want about science and how your side is rational, but if it's not working for you, then maybe you want to rethink it. Hey, this is Lloyd Albritton, Lloyd's Commentaries and Stories, right here on YouTube podcast. And thanks again for coming by.